and welcome to the Courtenay podcast. My guest today is Richard Jeffs, and we are going to talk about his documentary that he's done, which is really fantastic. Those of you who have been watching my show for a while are probably no strangers to the term stakeholder capitalism, but he has done a documentary really breaking this down, all the pernicious perils of this really, tyrannical agenda. And I would really say very underhanded, this shifting of the definition of words, this renaming things, and, introducing these new concepts that I don't know that everybody is all that versed in, right? What is stakeholder capitalism versus shareholder? And he does a really great job of breaking this down so that we can understand why this is so dangerous and what the real agenda behind it is. So I am excited to bring him on, and I'm excited for you all to check out. You should definitely check out the podcast he did. The documentary he did. It's pretty short. It's a, I think, 40-minute documentary, but he does a fantastic job. It's super comprehensive, but yet also really digestible. So let's bring him on. Richard Jeffs, how are you doing today?
Hello, Courtney. Lovely to see you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Likewise, yes, and thank you for being here. So for my audience who may not be versed with your work and your history, give us a little brief introduction, who you are and what made you take on this subject.
Yeah, thank you. So my background is that I worked in television, in broadcast TV. I worked for the major broadcasters in the UK since I was in my early 20s, and then I left the industry to become a tech entrepreneur. And I had an interest in the future of work, in particular, what the economy looks like when artificial intelligence starts taking our jobs. And that drew my attention to what was happening over at the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab and the Fourth Industrial Revolution initiative. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, I was very suspicious when I started to see a lot of the members of the World Economic Forum parroting the Great Reset and other World Economic Forum slogans. And I made a documentary called The New Normal, which was a viral documentary in 2020, which was the first big documentary, I suppose, that properly investigated the World Economic Forum's initiatives there. So after that, I went away and I started to think more about what's the bigger plan and the agenda of the World Economic Forum. How does the Fourth Industrial Revolution fit with the Great Reset and the other initiatives they're doing? And after a lot of research, and then 2.5 years of solid work on the documentary series. As you mentioned, the first documentary has been released, which is 40 minutes long, but it's an ongoing series, and so the rest of the series is rough cut, the next couple of episodes, while it will be actually an ongoing series. So what I discovered is that we are in the middle at 2025 of a 10-year transition to a global authoritarian. It's an economic system. It's a governance system that shifts authority away from, as you mentioned, the shareholders under shareholder capitalism, which is what the economic system we had prior to 2020, to a group of stakeholders who are the World Economic Forum's elite members. So that's essentially what I've been working on. And it's been a difficult journey to actually create the documentary, because what I aimed to achieve was to prove irrefutably that this transition is happening and that stakeholder capitalism is an authoritarian economic system that essentially creates this almost like this one world government. And stakeholder capitalism is the root cause of all the crises, the changes throughout society, and the woke ideology that's inflicted the minds of many people since 2020 and beyond.
Yes, absolutely. But I see the mind virus really just as a tool. It's a pawn. It's much like, I guess you could put the Gaia religion right under that umbrella too, right? The climate narrative. Can you explain to us, what is the difference between stakeholder and shareholder? How do you see it? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'll describe it the way Klaus Schwab explains it. So
Yes.
stakeholder capitalism is a economic system that Klaus Schwab pioneered, in his words, in the early 70s. And he actually founded the World Economic Forum to enact stakeholder capitalism globally. And he's been unsuccessful for 50 years up until 2020, when he and his stakeholders enacted the Great Reset of Capitalism initiative. So the way Klaus Schwab explains it is that there are several problems with shareholder capitalism, and shareholder capitalism means that it's an economic system that provides us shareholders, who are the people who own our companies, the people who own shares in our companies, with authority, with control on how we run our businesses. So we don't have a lot of interference from the government. And then over in China, they have state capitalism. So state capitalism shifts control to the state, to the government. So shareholder capitalism, our shareholders have control. State capitalism, the state has control. And then Klaus Schwab explains that we need a shift away from both of these systems. So we need to replace both of these systems with a new global system called stakeholder capitalism. And the reason for that is that shareholder capitalism, it incentivizes us shareholders to acquire short-term profits. So we're essentially running our business to generate profit for our shareholders, and there's problems with that, he explains. And we see that actually, in the pharmaceutical industry, where companies are putting profit before people. So some of these ideas are in fact true. Of course, it's his members who are exploiting that shareholder capitalism system. And he explains that we need a system that promotes more long-term gain for shareholders. So I don't really understand his reasons why for that, but I think a lot of people are just buying into it. Yeah, shareholder capitalism's got problems, and we need stakeholder capitalism, which I'll talk more about. And the two problems that he says that are being caused by shareholder capitalism, ever since he founded the World Economic Forum over 50 years ago, are two policies, or two issues, which he's turned into policies, and they're called inclusive and sustainable. So Klaus Schwab claims that shareholder capitalism are causing people of diversity. It was throughout the years is targeted feminism, women. Now it's black people, or it was in 2020, and it's moved on to trans people. He explains that they're oppressed by shareholder capitalism. And in order to make the economy more inclusive, we need to shift to this global authoritarian system to make the workplace more inclusive. And his solution to that is the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, or DEI, as it's also abbreviated to. So that's the first policy. That's essentially cultural Marxism. It's an idea to make the working class. It was used by Mao, it was weaponized by Mao during the Cultural Revolution, to make the working class believe they're oppressed, and to get them to want a more equitable system. So it was designed to get people to take to the streets and drive a revolution from the bottom up to essentially what was communism, or what communism is in China. So it's a playbook that Klaus Schwab's taken from tyrants such as Mao, and then remanufactured it for his own gain, to shift the world to stakeholder capitalism. And then the second policy is sustainable. And sustainable is based upon the idea that climate change poses an existential threat, and unless we give up all our freedom to emit carbon, and that means burning like oil and eating meat and all these other tyrannical ideas, then the world and all of us are going to end. So what he's doing at the moment is propagating these ideas to make us angry and fearful with shareholder capitalism. He's also saying that shareholder capitalism's got several other problems, and that we all need to transition to stakeholder capitalism, which shifts authority to his members to make the world more inclusive and sustainable. I hope that I made that clear enough.
Yeah, no, you did a great job, and very succinctly too, because it's like Nishi says, they like to muddy the waters to make it appear deep. So this gets very complex when they talk about it. So I think you did a good job simplifying that. Just for people to know, yes, this is 50 years ago, and of course Klaus Schwab was recruited by Herman Kahn and Henry Kissinger. Kissinger had his like a CIA funded Harvard program where Klaus was a student and they recruited him, and him and Herman Kahn shipped him off to create the European Symposium Management Forum. And that was a year later became the World Economic Forum. So it does seem like this is part of a much longer range plan, and that he is a bit of a figurehead for these ideas, and kind of like the CEO who's been propped up, but not necessarily the inventor or the brains behind the machine. So this is longer running. But when you talk about how the stakeholder is his members, can you talk a little bit about that? Because you had said that this is part of what you see as like a 10-year kind of economic shift. And of course, they've told us Agenda 2030, right? It was Agenda 21, it's now become Agenda 2030, and they have to have all of their sustainable development goals met by 2030. And this is, of course, tied to having us reach net zero, which is zero greenhouse gas emissions, which of course is absolutely impossible. There would be no life on this planet. And I know where the carbon they want to reduce, but this means that there would be no life, not just humans. And so, and despite the fact that they may want to reduce the population, if you have a feudal system, which does seem to be what they want to create, in my opinion, it looks like a technocratic neo-feudal system is what they're trying to impose. You still need some serfs to do your bidding for the Lord, right? For the lords, right? That somebody needs to be doing the work. So unless we really achieve a truly post-human world, which some people advocate, there are a group of people who are advocating for a truly post-human world. I still haven't figured out how that actually works. Even with all the synthetic biology that they're creating, I think they still need humans to extract the energy and the material, the raw material, and the consciousness. That's really what they're drawing from. So I don't know. I haven't figured out how they even believe that, but there are people who do. But that being said, so if that's true, that by 2030, this agenda, who are these stakeholders, and how is that going to be? How will they achieve this technocratic, right? Like the AI World Society is slated for 2045. So that sounds far away, but that's actually not that far away. And that's a complete control, as you said, world governance, but controlled by AI that supplants all human governments, and controls the entire Earth through, the Internet of Nanobio things, the Internet of bodies, the Internet of things, obviously. And this is outlined, obviously, on their websites, the UN Centennial, which is 2045. So, yeah, I don't know. Take any of that and run with it.
Yeah, lots to comment on there. Starting with the UN Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Goals. So the UN is a strategic partner of the World Economic Forum. The Great Reset Plan, which is what we're seeing at the moment, this is Klaus Schwab's baby. He designed this. He's an evil genius. He's got 17 doctorates, and the 17 Sustainable Goals is essentially what stakeholder capitalism looks like by 2030. So the Great Reset of Capitalism plan, which is shortened to the Great Reset, has several crises or mechanisms to shift us. You'll see the war playing out at the moment, and to destabilize our economy. And essentially, what the 17 Sustainable Goals are solutions to these problems that they're solving. So that's the world that they want to implement by 2030. Take a look at the 17 Sustainable Goals and almost flip it upside down to see what the problem is and how they then intend to solve this problem. Of course, with some horrible things. So if they're going to solve poverty, if they're going to solve the like a famine, then they'll do it with laboratory meat and GMO food, and we won't be able to eat cows meat or anything else that that's living livestock. Or so that's the UN agenda, which is all a partnership, the World Economic Forum,
Right. They officially
and
in 2019, the UN and the World. I mean, they've been working together for longer, but they officially partnered. So it's not just like, oh, they kind of support each other. Like they established an official partnership. Yeah.
yeah, of course, you know, of course, there is. If you go back further, the UN, as you mentioned there, you know, about the history, and then you've got, of course, the Rockefellers and Maurice Strong and other people who are very much involved in the whole sustainability idea that's been, you know, that they've tried to implement several times and failed, and at 2020 they've really dialed it up.
Yeah.
So. So yeah, it was the UN, and then what else was there? remind me something else that you
The
mentioned.
UN, and then really the stakeholders. Like you had said that that's really his
That's it.
member, and how is that tied to this technocratic takeover? Because that's really, I think, what we're seeing, and certainly,
Mm,
I know that here in the United States, we're really seeing this technocracy start to loom. A lot of people are cheering for some things, some of the corruption being exposed, some departments being taken down, which not to say that those aren't good things. They are, and they should be encouraged and supported. However, it really looks like what they're doing is placating people with that. Some of the resistance who might otherwise rise up. They're placated with some of these departments being taken down while they're rolling out some of this AI and technocratic. It looks like they're building the Technate, which Elon Musk's
mm,
father had outlined, when he was a member of Technocracy Inc. in 1936 to 1943. He was the president in Canada, but, of course, there was a U.S. division as well, started in New York City. So, yeah, I don't know, but it looks like that's rolling out. And I know you had mentioned China as well, if you want to address that too,
mm,
because when you read the blueprints of the AI World Society, they do talk about China as the model. And it looks like, in many ways, the United States, which I see it as much more of a consortium with a, industrial, military industrial apparatus that's tied to, the UK and Five Eyes apparatus. I think in many ways the United States has been presented as the bully. We're kind of the front face, but I don't think it's just the United States. But we have very much empowered China. I don't think China would be what it is today without, the Kissinger rapprochement plan. But now they're very much we're like an AI arms race with them, and it's almost like a Cold War 2.0, but the technocratic
mm.
version. So, yeah. I don't mean to
Yeah.
make light of
So
it and laugh. It's just it's absurd when you look at all of these ideas, and it's really kind of dystopian and horrifying to
mm,
me. So, yeah.
yeah. So the members, and of course, the his members include the heads of most Fortune 500 companies who own the AI companies, of course. I'll come onto that a bit more in a second. That's the fourth industrial revolution. That's got several components to it, not just jobs, but also, how they aim to, weaponize artificial intelligence to inflict tyranny on us. But the members include, as I mentioned, the heads of most Fortune 500 companies. You mentioned the Bill Gates, and you got the most infamous ones like him, and then you have the heads of most non so NGOs. It's like the World Health Organization, the UN, the EU. They're all members of the World Economic Forum. And then Klaus Schwab also explained that it's the heads of all G20 countries as well. So all G20 countries have partnerships, and that includes China, that includes Russia. So these are all members of the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
And Klaus Schwab explains that under stakeholder capitalism, we're all stakeholders. Therefore, this new political system, this new economic system, I call it a political system because it is essentially a shift to an authoritarian political system, although stakeholder capitalism is essentially a economic system. It's what Klaus Schwab explains is that it's stakeholder capitalism benefits all people and planets. That's the slogan for stakeholder capitalism. Benefits all people often he relates that to his inclusive ideas and planet. He relates that to his sustainable ideas, and you can see there's you show in the book at the moment, and you see I think it says a global economy that works for progress, people and planet. So when you see the words people and planet anywhere, that's stakeholder capitalism. What they're often do is change the word where you've got progress. They change it to another word, but essentially the two words they always use are people and planet. And what Klaus Schwab propagates is that stakeholder capitalism benefits all people and planet, which means it works in the interest of you and I. So under shareholder capitalism, it works in the interest of the shareholders. Under state capitalism, it works in the interest of the state, and under stakeholder capitalism, it works works in the interest of all people and planet. So we have to run our business in the interest of all people and the planet, which are the inclusive DEI and sustainable net zero policies. If I didn't mention that earlier on, the net zero is the solution to the sustainable problems that Klaus Schwab is propagating. But of course, if shareholder capitalism, the shareholders have control, and state capitalism, the state has control, then stakeholder capitalism, the stakeholders have control. And if we're all stakeholders, then that would imply we all have control. So that's the way Klaus Schwab is propagating it. That's the economic explanation for it, but hidden away in a blog. And I think it's this blog here that you're actually showing. It actually explains that it will be his key stakeholders who have control under stakeholder capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And they are the heads of most Fortune 500 companies, the heads of the NGOs and all G20 countries that will have control. And he explains that all these people are people and make use of the planet. Therefore, they should be wanting to act in the interest of all of us. So all of his propaganda is about explaining that this system benefits all of us, but really, when you read the small print, it's a system that shifts control to his key stakeholders, who are the people I explained, and most of them have been members of the World Economic Forum for a long time. They've been enrolled in a program called Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum, and indoctrinated with these inclusive and sustainable ideas. The aspiring politicians that Klaus Schwab found were then placed into positions of power all around the world, in every government, and so forth. And so the key stakeholders are ambassadors for stakeholder capitalism. Their mission is to transition us to stakeholder capitalism. So over here in the UK at the moment, we had Sunak, who is the head of the Conservative Party. He was driving. He's a World Economic Forum key stakeholder. You can see there, people and planet. Yeah, of course, he writes that everywhere. So Sunak is a key stakeholder, and then we also have the opposition, which was the Labour Party, and Starmer is also a World Economic Forum key stakeholder. So you can see there that you've got this controlled opposition idea.
Yes.
It doesn't matter who you vote for. We're getting stakeholder capitalism. So so that's the stakeholder capitalism's stakeholders. And then you've also got the technocracy and the AI, and I think before. So you said that China is the model, absolutely. So yeah, this is Keir Starmer's page on the World Economic Forum. You'll find most of the key stakeholders with their own membership page to show them that they are members of the World Economic Forum. They're not hiding it, of course. It's all in plain sight. Right. And then the model, of course, is China, as you mentioned. Xi Jinping is a very close friend of Klaus Schwab, and there is a scene in my film where he's actually saying to Xi Jinping, he's welcoming him to join him to make the world more inclusive and sustainable, and Xi Jinping then responds to that. So it's a system that essentially shifts control to the World Economic Forum's elite members, the key stakeholders, and one of them is Xi Jinping. So under stakeholder capitalism, Xi Jinping has control over the West. So it's a pretty daunting prospect thinking about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think people don't think about why would Xi Jinping have any power over the West, right? People typically think of it as very, polarized. You've got the East, the West, and that they're, one doesn't really have much influence or control over the other. So, yeah.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is a system that shifts authority not to the state like under Chinese communism, but to a global, which is like a global government
Right.
or governance system, and Xi Jinping is one of those key stakeholders who is part of that elite club who then has authority. So they're all essentially all come together to create this communist or fascist idea to inflict tyranny. But what they do, they disguise it as though they've got their key stakeholders, the heads of our governments, and they're the people that are rolling out the policies and the ideas. But the instructions are coming from this centralized government. But I'm not too sure what your views are. But I don't think that Donald Trump is a World Economic Forum key stakeholder. He's somebody who's pushing back against these ideas. There's a lot of ideas going around, especially here in the UK, around controlled opposition, and a lot of people are very skeptical, and it makes things very difficult for us in the freedom movement because nobody knows who to trust.
Of course.
I've had someone recently make a video about me saying that I'm controlled opposition, and it's just
I hear it all the time. So as far as Trump, my thoughts are, I do get the impression that he is he's an advocate for freedom, for entrepreneurial, constitutional liberties, and I think a lot of that is driven actually quite selfishly. His own interests, his own family, his business. My concern is that he's surrounded. And the reality of the situation is that the United States is a big player on the world stage. And so if you think about, you mentioned the stakeholders are really, the tops of all these Fortune 500 companies, right? These CEOs of these conglomerate organizations. And, if you're part of any of those, you're going to have to make deals and play ball, right, in order to maintain any kind of status or leverage in deal making. And Trump is no stranger to business and to deal making. And so my concern is that he is surrounded, and people have a lot of leverage over him. And I think that there's also only so much one person can do. The president is not a dictator. And even if he were, he's still one person, right? So he's being surrounded right now by some people who are very invested in ushering in a technocracy, a technocratic state. He's also surrounded by some people who are doing, wedge political games, and they're really kind of trying to separate and create division and chaos. He's also surrounded by some people who I think are proponents of what they call like the neo-reactionary movement or the Dark Enlightenment movement. And these have overlaps with technocracy ideology and philosophy, things like accelerationism, both on the left and the right. But they're also tied into some ideas that are linked to things like theocratic kind of authoritarian ideas. And he's got all of these players surrounding him. And you can debate how ignorant he is, how aware he is of what is going on, and how much of a role he's playing in all of it. I do feel like there's more evidence than not that indicates that he would like to see national sovereignty restored, which would be a potential bulwark against the tyranny. And not just for Americans, certainly restoring I'm not even a fan of all of the Constitution. I am really very supportive of the Bill of Rights. Like, we can get back to the Bill of Rights and kind of limit the government to a very minimal and really restore some sort of a protectorate rather than governance that is encroaching on our freedoms and liberties that were, as the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights stipulate were really our, inalienable rights endowed by our Creator. It's not really about a government, which is controlling the mind. Literally, that's the translation, right? So, my thoughts are that he does want to see, some of those liberties protected, the rights, the inalienable rights, are protected and restored, but. It's just hard to say that someone who is in a position that he is could be completely ignorant, or doesn't have to make some deals in order to get certain things through. I think that's kind of the reality. And I'm not, although,